Bank advisor George Leung says the trade war may make it hard for the SAR to meet its economic growth target. A 15-kilometer car chase before police stop a private vehicle loaded with suspected drugs. Good evening and thank you for joining us. George Leung, senior advisor to Hang Seng Bank, says the tariff war may prevent the mainland and Hong Kong from meeting this year's economic growth forecasts of 5% and 2% respectively. With that, Leung thinks the mainland should further open up its market and boost domestic demand over the long term. And Hong Kong can also benefit from such moves. Over the past weeks, all eyes have been on the escalating tariff war. Appearing on the TVB news program, George Leung, a senior advisor to Hang Seng Bank and formerly chief executive officer of the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce, said the tariff spats won't last too long. Leung said China and the U.S. depend much on each other over many aspects. And under the tariff war, the U.S. will soon face high inflation rates and a broken supply chain, while Chinese enterprises, especially small and medium-sized ones, will also be hit hard, putting both sides under great pressure to solve the problem as soon as possible. He believes that Washington's strategy of mobilizing other countries to contain China may not succeed, but the economic growth of the mainland and Hong Kong this year may not meet original expectations. Leung said whether China can maintain its 5% growth target remains a question, but Beijing should have multiple measures in its toolbox to buoy the economy. He predicts if the tariff war continues, with the levies being raised to more than 10 to 20%, the impact on Hong Kong's economy throughout the year will be relatively large. Leung said the domestic market of the U.S. had played an important role in America's ascension on the global stage in the past, as many export-led economies hold the greenback as assets. That's why Leung said the mainland should further open up its market and boost domestic demand to woo more allies in trade. While he noted some of these allies may not boast large enough domestic demand or markets to offset the loss from the U.S. market, such policy directions are necessary to counter the repercussions from trade wars. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said it is necessary to recognize that the current transformation of the global trade pattern will bring about medium and long-term structural economic changes. He said it is important to maintain Hong Kong's safe and stable environment. In his blog post, Chan wrote that in the past week, Hong Kong held 2 large-scale international conferences, and he exchanged views with business leaders from various countries. He said they unanimously criticized the so-called reciprocal tariffs imposed by the United States. Chan believes that in face of the trade war, it is very important for Hong Kong to remain a free port and maintain its free trade policy. The finance chief also cited some members of the financial sector as saying that in the past few months, the proportion of shares of some recently listed mainland enterprises subscribed by foreign investors has risen significantly compared with the past 2 years. He said the expansion of some overseas financial institutions in Hong Kong also reflected how Washington's policy uncertainty has led to more investment in Hong Kong and mainland China. A private car loaded with suspected drugs smashed past a police roadblock in Tsim Sha Tsui. Chasing the car for nearly 15 kilometers, the police stopped it in Fo Tan and arrested 4 people inside the car. The police seized suspected drugs including cannabis products and space oil from the car. A 23-year-old male driver failed a breathalyzer test, while the other 3 passengers aged between 20 and 22 were also arrested for allegedly dealing in drugs. Samantha Lee has the details.
A white electric vehicle collided head-on with a police patrol car on Wong Chuk Yuan Street in Fo Tan. The crash caused damage to the front of both cars. 2 police officers suffered slight injuries on their knee and neck, respectively. The police said they were about to stop and check a car they deemed suspicious while setting up roadblocks on Chatham Road South in Tsim Sha Tsui at 5:30 a.m. As the police approached, the car driver failed to stop and sped off towards Sha Tin. Police officers immediately pursued the car and chased it all the way to an entrance of a public housing estate in Fo Tan, Chung Yuan Estate. The car was stopped while trying to make an U-turn. Some residents nearby said the police investigation went until 9 a.m. this morning. This boy said he saw two cars hit each other and that many traffic officers at the scene. While this man said he could hear the noise from the incident, which lasted for a couple of hours. A 23-year-old male driver wearing a black hood who failed a breathalyzer test faced charges of furious driving and drink driving. Multiple kinds of suspected drugs were discovered in the car, including 4.7 kilograms of cannabis chocolate, 1 kilogram of cannabis oil, 100 grams of cannabis sweets, 30 grams of marijuana, 100 grams of space oil, and 3.8 grams of cocaine. Meanwhile, 2 men and 1 woman in the car, aged between 20 and 22, were also arrested for allegedly trafficking drugs. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
The chairman of a U.S. Congressional Committee on China is urging 2 major American banks to withdraw their involvement in the listing of battery maker CATL on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The first-time share sale for a contemporary Amperex technology company, or CATL, is expected to be the year's biggest listing in Hong Kong. John Molinar, chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, said the 2 U.S. banks are exposing themselves and their American investors to significant regulatory, financial, and reputational risks. He made the warning in letters to the CEOs of Bank of America and JP Morgan. CATL is included in a Pentagon blacklist, citing its alleged links to the Chinese military. President Donald Trump is also hoping to deter American retail investors in funding CATL's listing. The committee recently issued a report calling Chinese AI company DeepSeek a profound threat to U.S. national security. A Boeing jet meant for China's Xiamen Airlines has returned to its U.S. production hub, a victim of the tit-for-tat bilateral tariffs started by President Donald Trump. A 737 MAX with Xiamen Airlines livery landed at Seattle's Boeing field on Saturday. It is among several 737 MAX jets waiting at Boeing's Zhoushan Completion Center in China for their final delivery. Trump this month raised baseline tariffs on Chinese imports to 145%. In retaliation, China imposed a 125% tariff on U.S. goods. It is not clear which party made the decision for the plane to return to Seattle. Meanwhile, Malaysia's flagship carrier Malaysia Airlines is considering buying C909, C919 and C929 aircraft from Chinese manufacturer Comac. Malaysia is keen on expanding trade exchanges with China, especially given the U.S. tariff environment. Beijing is also stepping up commercial aircraft cooperation with Vietnam and Cambodia. And still ahead, a look at how Catholics and Copts in Hong Kong celebrate Easter. The priest of Temple Street serving the hungry and homeless in the city. And Tin Hau Festival celebrations in Yuen Long. Welcome back. Today is Easter Sunday, with Christians celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ over 2,000 years ago. Timothy Lee takes us to some local Christian communities to witness the final days of Lent leading up to Easter.
Faithful Catholics gathered at St. Teresa's Church in central Kowloon for a Mass on Thursday last week. Every year, the church commemorates the sacrifice of Christ by recalling his final hours before the crucifixion, with one of the most iconic rituals being Maundy, otherwise known as the washing of the feet ritual.
The ritual of the feet is a memory of what Jesus has done just before dying. He was the master of his disciples, and he washed their feet, a work that normally was done by a slave. So this means that we should follow his example, and whatever position, whatever role we have in the society, we should serve others.
The Catholic religion may be familiar to many in the city. But far away from the famous church buildings and tucked away in the industrial corner of Kuntong is Hong Kong's only Coptic church. The church, whose followers mainly consist of Egyptians and Ethiopians, traces its history all the way back to the 1st century AD, when the apostle St. Mark founded the church in the Egyptian city of Alexandria. Today, several hundred of them call Hong Kong home. Father Dawood, the priest in charge of the church, explains some of the key differences in how Easter is celebrated between his church and other churches.
Normally, we pray by Coptic. The Coptic language is a traditional language in our church since we start. The word Coptic is coming from Egypt, so this is the original language in Egypt. We are very traditional churches, so you found our prayer is a little bit longer. Our Lent is 55 days. Other churches maybe only 40 days.
Take holy water.
Father Dawood, who was witness to the religious persecution of his church back in his home country of Egypt, explained how Easter is an exceptional time for his community to remember a core Christian message.
Forgiveness, it's easy to give you peace. If you keep in your heart some hate, you couldn't have peace. The key message for resurrection gives us hope. When we celebrate resurrection, it's meaning let's start or let's renew our hope again.
Here in St. Mark and St. Thomas Coptic Orthodox Church, an icon of the 21 Christian martyrs murdered by Islamic State militants is prominently displayed. In a step towards unity, their sainthood is also recognized by the Catholic Church. Furthermore, this Easter is special as Eastern and Western churches are celebrating it together on the same day. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Meanwhile, TVB News follows Catholic priest Father John Wotherspoon, dubbed the priest of Temple Street, on how his charity has been serving the hungry and homeless in the heart of Yang Ma Tei for some 40 years. Father John Wotherspoon, also known as the priest of Temple Street, is a familiar face with the locals and street sleepers of this neighborhood. His Dr. Jesus Center, located at 187 Temple Street, is a hub for not just Christian learning, but also for benevolence and inclusivity.
Jackie, I need in home.
The 78-year-old Australian priest and missionary has spent some 40 years in Hong Kong and Zhaoqing, Guangdong province, having devoted half his life to serving the poor. Over the past 15 years, Father Wotherspoon has focused his work on ministering and supporting the less fortunate along Hong Kong's Temple Street. They include offering food to the homeless. Among the beneficiaries is Uncle Wen, who has slept on the streets for 16 years. He says he's grateful for having a shelter to share food and chat with one another. Chian here said even though it's not a real home, this place has started to feel like one.
Temple Street is special because this is one of the areas in Hong Kong with the biggest number of needy people, biggest number of street sleepers, drug addicts, people out of prison, people who work on the street. And I think this is an area where we Christians need to give special attention. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, where Jesus says, I was hungry, no clothes, no place to stay. I was in prison, I was sick, that sort of person. And he says we should help people like that, because when we help people like that, we're helping Jesus himself.
Mercy Hong Kong has also set up a dim sum restaurant around 2 years ago, hiring only people with criminal records.
The organization has distributed over 500 meal cards to those in need, allowing recipients to collect one free meal every day. The public can also purchase luncheon vouchers and pass on their care and love to low-income individuals in the neighborhood.
The priest hopes it can serve as a shelter and give ex-convicts a new lease of life. Just as the old has gone, the new is here. Tomorrow is the last day of the 4-day Easter holiday. The Transport Department has urged vacationers to cross the border during non-peak hours. Authorities expect more local residents to return to Hong Kong via various land checkpoints later today and tomorrow. Public transport operators will strengthen service to cope with expected rise in demand. Inbound travelers are advised to plan their trips in advance and allow more time for border crossing. Meanwhile, Tin Hau Festival celebrations were held in Yuen Long today. Among the highlights was a parade featuring 37 teams from the district. They included a golden dragon dance comprising 200 performers. Police force also fielded its anti-scam mascot as its representative. The parade kicked off near the Phung Kam Street Gymnasium and ended at Tin Hau Temple. Tin Hau Festival, which falls on the 23rd day of the 3rd lunar month, celebrates the birth of the goddess of the sea. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.